I was still holding my fork when my dad froze mid-motion, staring at his phone like it had just insulted him. "Who spent $297.84 on design software and tech gear?" he asked, voice flat but sharp enough to cut the room in half. The air at the dinner table went tight. I felt it before I understood it. Marissa didn't even look at me at first. She took a slow sip of water, then smiled faintly and said, almost lazily, "Well, Evelyn has been really into those fancy design programs lately." She tilted her head, eyes flicking toward me for half a second. "I mean, she talks about them nonstop." It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it landed exactly where she wanted it to. My mom turned to me immediately. My dad lowered the phone. And just like that, the story was written before I ever opened my mouth. I'm Evelyn Harper. I was 18 years old, 2 weeks away from starting my first semester as a design communications major at a public university in Oregon. And in that moment, sitting at a perfectly set dinner table in a perfectly normal middle-class home, I realized something I'd spent my whole life trying not to see. In my family, truth didn't matter nearly as much as who was speaking. Growing up, people always said I was lucky. Stable home, educated parents, no real trauma. And on paper, that was true. My dad worked in finance, steady job, steady income. My mom ran a small online business selling handmade stationery and home decor. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. The kind of family that smiled in holiday photos and sent group texts with inspirational quotes. And then there was my sister. Marissa Harper was 5 years older than me and somehow always 5 steps ahead of everyone else. She was the kind of person teachers remembered years later. Valedictorian energy without trying. President of the student council, panel speaker, award recipient. The girl whose photo ended up on the university website with captions like, "A future leader in the making." When Marissa talked, people listened. When she made mistakes, they were reframed as pressure or high expectations. When she succeeded, it felt inevitable, like the universe was just doing its job. I learned early that my role was different. I wasn't the disappointment. I wasn't the rebel. I was something quieter than that. I was the extra sentence no one reread. The kid who was doing fine. The one who didn't need attention because I never asked for it. I loved design, visual storytelling, layouts, colors, concepts. I could spend hours lost in it. But in our house, interests only mattered if they came with trophies or headlines. Creativity without prestige felt invisible. And invisibility becomes a habit. At dinner that night, no one asked me if I'd used the card. No one asked where I'd been that afternoon. No one asked to see my laptop or my email receipts. They didn't need to. My mom sighed the way she always did when she thought she was being patient. "Evelyn, you should have asked. College doesn't mean you can just take things." "I didn't," I started. My dad raised a hand. "We'll talk about it later." Marissa leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, expression calm, untouched. She didn't need to defend herself. She never did. That's the thing about living under someone else's shadow for too long. Eventually, people stop seeing the difference between light and darkness. They just assume whatever stands tallest must be right. That night wasn't the first time I felt overlooked. It was just the first time the consequences were loud enough to echo. Because this wasn't really about money, or software, or a credit card. It was about a family that had decided, years ago, who was trustworthy and who was convenient. And as I sat there, listening to my parents discuss responsibility and boundaries, like I wasn't even in the room, something shifted quietly inside me. I didn't feel angry. I felt clear. Clear that no one was coming to ask for my side of the story. Clear that my silence had been mistaken for guilt. Clear that in this house, being the quieter daughter meant being the easier one to blame. And clear that if I wanted to be seen, I would have to stop waiting for permission. Because that dinner wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. After that dinner, everything in the house changed. But nothing was said out loud. The accusation didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly, wrapped in concern and parental responsibility, which somehow made it worse. My dad asked me for my laptop the next morning, his voice calm in a way that felt rehearsed. My mom stood behind him, arms folded, already convinced this was for my own good. "Until we sort this out," she said, "we're taking a step back." A step back meant my laptop was placed in my father's office drawer. My debit card disappeared from my wallet sometime before lunch. The password to the shared family account was changed. No yelling, no grounding. Just control. Clean, efficient, absolute. I stood there barefoot on the kitchen tile, feeling like I'd been quietly erased. I didn't use the card, I said. I kept my voice steady. I'd learned that raising it only made adults hear defiance instead of truth. You can check my email, my purchase history. I can show you. My dad didn't look at me. He was already scrolling through his phone again, jaw tight. Evelyn, this isn't about proving anything, he said. It's about learning boundaries. My mom nodded. You're about to start college. You need to understand consequences. I looked at Marissa. She was leaning against the counter, perfectly relaxed, phone in hand. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her silence was louder than my words. So you're just deciding? I asked. Without asking me? My mom sighed, the same way she always did when she thought I was being difficult instead of hurt. Sweetheart, we know you, and Marissa wouldn't make something like this up. There it was. Not proof, not logic, just hierarchy. I tried again, softer this time. I would never do that without asking. You know that. My dad finally looked up. His expression wasn't angry. It was disappointed, which somehow felt heavier. Evelyn, you're not as mature as you think you are. That sentence stayed with me long after he left the room. For the rest of the day, the house felt unfamiliar, like I'd been moved into someone else's life without warning. I wasn't forbidden from speaking. I wasn't punished loudly. I was simply monitored. Every question sounded like an interrogation dressed up as care. What were you planning to use the software for? Are you feeling pressured about money? Is there something you're not telling us? Every answer I gave was met with polite skepticism, as if honesty from me required verification, while assumptions about me did not. That night, I heard my parents talking in the living room, not whispering, just low enough that they thought I couldn't hear. She's young, my mom said. She gets impulsive. My dad replied, college brings out entitlement sometimes. I sat on my bed, staring at the empty space where my laptop usually was, and felt something in my chest tighten, not into anger, but into something colder. I realized then that I wasn't being punished for an action. I was being corrected for an identity. The next morning, Marissa and I crossed paths in the hallway. She stopped, just slightly, blocking my way. Her voice was casual, almost friendly. You know, she said, this wouldn't be such a big deal if you just owned up to it. I stared at her. Owned up to what? She shrugged, lips curling into a small, knowing smile. Everyone makes mistakes. You don't have to play innocent. There was no heat in her words, no cruelty you could point to. Just enough suggestion to make me doubt myself for half a second, and then hate myself for almost doing it. That was the moment I understood the game. Marissa didn't need to accuse me directly. She just needed to frame me. Let the story land where it always did. In a family that already believed she was the truth, all she had to do was hint. By the third day, I stopped trying to explain. Every attempt felt like digging deeper into a hole someone else had decided was mine. So I went quiet. Not in defeat, but in observation. I watched how easily my parents enforced rules without asking questions. How naturally they spoke over me. How effortlessly Marissa moved through the house, untouched by suspicion, untethered by consequence. And for the first time, I saw the pattern clearly. This wasn't about trust being broken. It was about trust never having been given to me in the first place. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. I didn't have a plan. I didn't even have proof. But sitting there in my room, stripped of access, stripped of voice, stripped of the benefit of the doubt, I made one quiet decision. If they weren't going to listen to my words anymore, then one day they would have to face my silence, and whatever it was becoming. 3 days later, my aunt showed up at the house unannounced. Claire Morgan, my mom's younger sister, the only adult who had ever really seen me, walked through the front door holding an iPad in one hand and a printed receipt in the other. She didn't smile. She didn't ask if it was a bad time. Hey, she said casually to me, like it was just another weekend visit. Then she turned to my dad. You said the charge happened last Monday, right? He nodded, already looking uneasy. Yeah, why? Because I called the store, Claire said, laying the receipt on the kitchen table. It didn't go through until Tuesday, 3:46 p.m. to be exact. My mom froze. My dad blinked. Marissa wasn't even in the room. "And guess what?" Claire continued, her voice calm but razor-sharp. "Electrotech logs every transaction, ties it to ID scans. Oh, and their cameras are pristine." She tapped the iPad and turned it toward them. There, in full color, time-stamped, high-resolution footage, was Marissa, wearing a slate gray coat she always left at our place, hair tied back, smiling as she swiped Dad's card and walked out with a bag of equipment and a receipt in her pocket. No mistaking it. No way to explain it away. The room went completely silent. My mom stared like the screen might dissolve if she blinked long enough. My dad leaned forward, as if getting closer would somehow soften the truth. Claire stood her ground. "I didn't come here to humiliate anyone," she said, "but someone owes Evelyn a very big apology." I waited. No one said a word. My dad ran a hand down his face, exhaling slowly. "We'll talk to Marissa," he muttered. "We'll handle it." Claire's eyebrows rose. "That's not what I said." Still, nothing. My mom's lips were pressed tight, her eyes flicking between the table and the wall. She finally cleared her throat. "She's under a lot of pressure," she said softly. "Graduate programs, research deadlines. It was probably a mistake." "A mistake?" I said before I could stop myself. My voice cracked. "She looked the cashier in the eye. She walked out smiling." My dad shot me a warning look. "Let's not make this worse." Make this worse? I swallowed the heat building in my chest. Claire looked at me, then back at them. "You blamed your daughter for something she didn't do," she said. "You punished her without proof. And now that you have proof, you're more worried about Marissa's future than Evelyn's trust." Still no apology, no acknowledgement. Just the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence like white noise over a disaster. I turned to leave. My mom called after me, "Let's just move on from this." I stopped in the hallway. "Do you even hear yourself?" Claire stepped forward, but I shook my head. I didn't want a rescue. I didn't want another adult to buffer the damage. I just wanted them to look at me, to really see the girl they dismissed, doubted, erased. But they couldn't. Or wouldn't. The next morning, Marissa avoided me. She came downstairs late, grabbed coffee, didn't say a word. No apology, no explanation. Just the same unbothered air she always wore like perfume. My laptop was quietly returned to my room. No ceremony, no comment. My bank access restored, like nothing had happened. And still, no one said they were sorry. That was the moment it finally sank in. Justice in this house came second to convenience. They wouldn't confront the golden daughter. Not if it meant cracking the image they'd spent years polishing. Not if it risked questions from the outside. Grad schools, professors, scholarship boards. They didn't want truth. They wanted control. And they'd rather silence the innocent than admit the favorite had cracks in her halo. So that day, I stopped waiting for fairness. I stopped expecting apologies. And somewhere deep in the silence they gave me, I began building something else. When I moved into my dorm, no one said goodbye. Not really. My dad helped carry one box. My mom smoothed my hair, then immediately asked if I remembered to bring a lint roller. Marissa wasn't even there. She had a panel discussion that day. No hugs, no tears. Just a half-hearted, keep us posted, before the door shut behind them. And honestly, I didn't feel sad. I felt clean. Like I had finally stepped outside of the glass box I'd been shoved into my whole life. At school, I didn't talk much about my family. When people asked, I gave them the polite version. "Oh, I have an older sister doing her master's in political psychology," I'd say. "My parents are into finance and home businesses." That was enough. No one needed to know that I was the quiet draft they never meant to publish. I didn't try to prove myself anymore. I didn't speak up in class just to be heard. I didn't raise my hand out of desperation for approval. I became quiet by design, because silence wasn't submission. Not anymore. It was control. Marissa came home for Thanksgiving. She floated into the house like she always did. Confident, efficient, commanding the room with her polished laugh and storybook success. Our parents beamed. I watched. And this time, I noticed things. Like how she referenced a research paper she didn't write, because I recognized a quote from a freelance essay bank I'd used once. How she mentioned coordinating a student initiative when I knew for a fact she hadn't attended the last 3 meetings. How she brushed off a student's concern over email and blamed the professor for miscommunication. It was subtle, too subtle for someone who wasn't paying attention. But I was. And I began keeping track, not to hurt her, not yet, but to understand her. The version of Marissa I'd been told to worship my whole life wasn't real. She was curated, crafted, carefully edited like a college brochure. And beneath the surface, there were cracks, growing wider the closer you looked. So I started writing, not poetry, not a journal, a log. I documented dates, names, course codes. I found posts from students anonymously venting about the golden girl who never did her own work. I tracked inconsistencies in her timeline. I cross-checked LinkedIn claims with university records. I even searched old forums for whispers of her having a ghostwriter during undergrad. Meanwhile, I kept building something of my own. I opened a private design portfolio under a pseudonym, E. Rowan. I started small. Twitch banners, YouTube thumbnails, logo cleanups. $5 turned into 10, then 20, then my first $100 commission. It wasn't groundbreaking, but it was mine. Each project chipped away at the part of me that thought I needed anyone's permission to be seen. Sometimes I'd stay up till 2 a.m., sketching ideas, headphones in, screen glowing in the dark, while Marissa posted another filtered photo of her ambitious life from across the house. Same Wi-Fi, same, different worlds. The funny thing was, my parents never asked what I was working on. Not once. As long as I stayed out of the way, smiled when spoken to, and didn't make noise, I was the ideal background character again. And for now, I let them think that, because I'd finally realized something terrifyingly liberating. If I was always going to be the invisible daughter, then I might as well use that invisibility to my advantage. No one watches the quiet girl. No one suspects the silent one. And while they kept looking at Marissa like she was the center of gravity, I was already learning to move in shadows. Not hiding, planning. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving their story. I was preparing to write my own. It happened the week before finals. The folder was ready, labeled, time-stamped, cross-referenced. It contained everything: screenshots of emails Marissa never wrote, drafts she paid others to complete, fake citations, forum complaints, and even a screen-recorded message from a student she once threatened into silence. I didn't send it alone. Sophie, one of my classmates and one of Marissa's quiet casualties, had reached out weeks earlier. She'd written a paper for Marissa during undergrad, promised a grad school reference in return. She got ghosted. I never asked her to help, but when I showed her the file, she said one thing: let's make sure she never does this to anyone else again. Together, we refined it. We added statements. We redacted names for safety. We cross-checked every claim. We didn't just want revenge. We wanted the truth to be undeniable. We sent it anonymously to the Graduate Academic Board, the Ethics Committee, and the Scholarship Foundation funding Marissa's research. Timing was everything. It was 2 days before the research fellowship was to be announced, 1 week before holiday break, 3 days before Marissa was set to speak at a university roundtable on academic integrity, and then we waited. The investigation began within 48 hours. At first, I didn't say a word. I watched from a distance. Marissa came home that weekend, quieter than usual. She didn't mention school. She didn't bring up her fellowship. My parents kept trying to make small talk, but the tension was sharp, like everyone was pretending not to feel the floor creak under them. Then came the email. I wasn't supposed to see it, but my dad left his office door open. His voice dropped. My mom was pacing. All I caught was the phrase, pending disciplinary action, immediate suspension. And just like that, the illusion shattered. Marissa didn't go back to campus. The roundtable event was canceled. Her name was removed from the fellowship site. My parents didn't explain anything. They didn't yell, they didn't cry. They just looked small. I went back to school the next morning without saying goodbye. I didn't need to. That night, my dad called. His voice was quiet, strained. "Evelyn," he said, "we saw the documents. We know." I didn't answer. He took a breath. "We chose not to see things. That was our failure, not yours." Still, I stayed silent. I needed to hear the rest. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he added, "but I want you to know, we were wrong." There it was. Not an excuse, not a dismissal, just the sentence I'd waited years to hear. I didn't cry. I didn't respond. I just hung up gently, and for the first time, felt no weight in my chest. The house was never mine. The family roles were never fair. But none of that mattered anymore, because I had become someone outside of them. My freelance work had taken off. Clients returned. I was building something I didn't have to beg to be part of. My name, my real name, was starting to mean something, not because it was praised at the dinner table, but because I'd given it value myself. I moved into a studio apartment not far from campus. Tiny, creaky floorboards, ugly counters. But it was mine. Entirely mine. I kept a single photo on the wall. Not of family, not of Marissa, just a piece of art I designed the night after I uploaded the file that changed everything. It was a minimalist self-portrait, a girl standing at the edge of a long shadow, walking forward without looking back. Marissa never reached out, not once, and I didn't need her to, because I wasn't looking to be invited into someone else's spotlight anymore. I had already built my own. And maybe that's the real power, not in being believed, but in no longer needing belief to stand tall. So if you've ever been the quiet one, the overlooked one, the easy one to blame, know this: you're not invisible. You're just becoming someone they're not ready to see yet, and when they do, it won't be because they allowed it. It'll be because you showed up anyway. If you've stayed with me all the way through this story, thank you. I hope it made you feel seen. I hope you find your own light, even if no one hands it to you. And if you're listening around the holidays, I wish you a peaceful, honest, and truly joyful Christmas. No masks, no pretending, just space to be yourself. If you connected with this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more stories from other women finding their voice, right here. You're not alone. And this is just the beginning.